Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soldiers of Cinema podcast. I'm Clark Coffey, and with me, as always, is my trusty co-host up there in Canada, or is it Canada? I can't remember. Which one is it?
Either one works.
Either one works. All the way up there in Canada, Mr. Cullen McFader. What's going on, buddy?
Not much. We're here we're getting close to 100 episodes here, which I think is
we're getting close.
Kind of
I forget how many we're at now, but we're getting close.
This is 97, I believe.
What? Is it 97? No. I'm going to have to double check that. So. Okay, well, if you're right, then the film that we're going to be discussing for our 97th episode, if that is in fact the correct number, it sounds a little high to me, but you know what? I'm getting old. My memory's not that great. But our film for this episode, regardless of what number it is Thief, Michael Mann's 1981 feature film debut.
Are you clear?
You've been putting down 2-3 scores a month. You want to put down contract scores all over the country, working directly for me?
I am self-employed. Guy steal ice. Just diamonds or cash.
Fine. I'll make you a millionaire in 4 months.
I wear $150 slacks. I wear silk shirts. I wear $800 suits. I wear a gold watch. I wear a perfect D, flawless, 3-carat ring. I'm a thief.
Do you think that I have been waiting for you to come along?
You're gonna marry her and have some kids?
Yes. Hey, I'm talking to you. Hey.
Hey, what? What is going on in your life that is so terrific? I'm just asking you to be with me. Go.
We got a problem.
I want my money.
We're your new partners. We're in for 10 points.
I am the last guy you want to mess with.
You get paid what I say. You do what I say.
You don't know from one day to the next whether you're going to be killed, go home, or get busted.
What's wrong with you?
James Caan. Thief.
Now, Cullen, you brought it to my attention, as I just now stated and admitted that my memory sometimes is not so great. I had forgotten that we had previously done Heat. Now, I think it's been a while ago. I think we did Heat. I mean, like probably a few years ago, right?
I think Heat was one of our first, like one of the first 10 movies that we did when we stopped doing the Herzog episodes. So this would have been 2020, probably like mid 2020. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So maybe like upwards of around 5 years ago. Is that what you're saying?
I believe so. If my memory serves correct.
I can't even believe that we've been doing this that long. You'd think that we'd be better at this by now. 5 years in, it's like, okay, how come we're not pros? I mean, what can I say? So I guess I had forgotten that we had done Heat, but you know what? It doesn't matter. Even if we, I think it actually makes this more interesting that we had discussed Heat, because I think part of this discussion might be, kind of contrasting and comparing this film and that one. And I think it's a little bit of an interesting insight into the creative process, because I think you see Michael Mann, working through some things here that he obviously kind of works through again on Heat, thematically, character perspective, obviously plot, stylistically. I mean, he's still like working through a lot of the same things in Heat as he started working through on this film. And we can kind of compare and contrast that. But as we always like to do, we'll kind of start off, before we really do a deep dive into some of the aspects of this film, into our personal kind of, our first personal experiences with the film, our relationship with the film, what it was like, our first viewing, if we can even remember, or maybe it was just a few days ago, depending on, you never know. Yeah. But for me, so this is kind of a weird one, right? Like, I've loved Michael Mann for a long time. which isn't to say that I think every one of his films is great. I don't think that's the case. But, for me, Michael Mann, I think you could argue his sweet spot, or like where he really hit his stride, was when I was really kind of, coming into my own as like in my little mind at the time, a film connoisseur, like when I was in high school and I'm like a sophomore, and I went to go see Last of the Mohicans in the theater in '92, and I saw Heat when it came out in '95. I thought The Insider was an amazing film. I mean, I feel like the '90s, he had three awesome films, and of course, I think Collateral is an outstanding film. And that, I mean, you could argue maybe that's his last exceptional film was Collateral. But I mean, I feel like he was really in the zone in the '90s. And so, and Heat is one of my all-time favorites. Although I really have to say I love The Insider quite a bit.
Yes, me too.
But I guess the point is that what I almost like surprised that I have to admit that at least as far as my memory serves, I had not seen this film until about 6 months ago.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Yes. And I think I first caught it on, maybe it was the Criterion channel, maybe is where I first caught it. And I mean, I feel like so remiss to have not seen this film, until so late in the game. And I don't, I guess, look, it's like, how many thousands and thousands upon thousands of films are there out there that are worthy of being watched? I mean, it just, there's only so much time in a person's life. And unfortunately, I do have to do other things than just watch films all day. But I just hadn't seen it. It just escaped me. I've also not seen The Keep. And I think that might be it. I think I've seen every other one of his films, with the exception of The Keep. I haven't seen that all the way through, even to this day now. But I saw this for the first time, like I said, about 6 months ago or so. And I was I was really, really impressed. I really enjoyed the film. And on just about every level. And I guess it just really hit that like early 80s, I don't know, everything. Tangerine. I mean, we've done a few of the Tangerine Dream scored films. We've done a few of those here, and we've done a few films of this era. And you had talked about how some aspects of this film had reminded you of Barfly, and
Fat City,
I think this is just like my wheelhouse, man. I don't know what I think. This is just there's a bunch of aspects of this film that just line up to kind of like, it floats my boat. What can I say?
Yeah.
And I'm not even a huge James Caan fan. I mean, I certainly don't dislike him and his work at all, but I'm not a big, like, I wouldn't call myself a fan, but I feel like his performance here is outstanding. Tangerine Dream score is, in my opinion, just out of sight superb. Michael Mann, this is his first feature film, but I feel like he is just firing on all cylinders. I think it's a beautiful film. I think the casting is fun. It's just like an atmospheric and tonal masterpiece, in my opinion. So I don't know. And then Criterion came out with the new 4K disc not too long ago. I snatched that up and I was like, hey, why not? Why not pick this? Perfect excuse to rewatch it with this new beautiful 4K release. And so there you have it. There's my history with the film. What about you?
Yeah, excellent. No, I saw this for the first time, I think probably 2013. I was in, would have been in grade 10. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So
I know. I'm getting choked up.
Crazy. Here's something that's crazy about that is closer in time to when we would have met than now.
Yeah,
we would have met in 2016. So it's almost been 10 years.
But it's blowing my mind. Yeah.
But so I because I believe the reason, if I remember correctly, if I'm getting my not getting my wires crossed.
Right. Well, you're getting
I
old
watched
too now.
Heat
You know.
back then. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I watched Heat back then because
Yeah.
Grand Theft Auto 5 came out, and I played Grand Theft Auto 5, and I was like, oh wow, this is like. And then I don't remember where somebody mentioned, oh, this is very similar. It clearly takes a lot of inspiration from Heat. Watched Heat, and then just really liked Heat, and thought, okay, well, what else has this guy done? I knew about Miami Vice and things like that, but I don't think I'd seen it. And like both the show and the film. And so then I watched Thief, and don't remember much about it, honestly. Like, it was kind of, I might as well have watched it new this time, because I barely remember. I remember enjoying it, but it just didn't really stick with me the same way that Heat did.
Fair.
And I think that's, partially age. I was younger, I was in high school, and Heat is louder and bigger and kind of has a larger scope to it than this.
Sure.
But I think now, like this time around, I really came to appreciate how small scale this feels in comparison to Heat.
Yep.
I think, again, not to just talk about Heat the whole time we do this movie, but I think that, like you said, it is an interesting kind of contrasting situation there where, I didn't even realize this beforehand, but that Michael Mann actually wrote Heat before doing this. And then
and he did that little TV. He
yes.
did that TV movie version too. What was that called?
That was called L.A. Takedown. Which he did,
yeah.
And that was kind of his Heat. Like, a lot of the scenes are verbatim the same.
Right.
And
different actors,
but so
different,
and smaller budget and all that. Yeah.
Budget, yep.
But I think what's interesting about that to me is that this, and from what I've read, from how I understand it, is that Heat was initially, again, larger, more action oriented, more driven by like set pieces and things like that. And then after doing this, which was restricted by budget, and so again, I think it's like every filmmaker's philosophy is, if you want to do big set pieces, I did this with my first feature where I wanted to do big set pieces and didn't have the budget to do those. So you turn those big set pieces into emotional set pieces, and you say, okay, how can I achieve the same level of excitement but through conversation and dialogue? And so I think that likely was kind of the limitation.
Like emotional set piece.
Exactly. And so I think that because of that, I think that Thief became a much more personal story. It's this kind of very common theme with all of Michael Mann's films, but like this lone wolf, or this person who, this stoic man who has like a skill, and it's like, this is all I can do, this is all I'm good at, and I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna, I'm willing to throw away all my personal relationships for this. And even though you still see that pull to want romance and want love and affection, you could totally see that through line right into Heat, and a lot of his other movies. I mean, same thing with Manhunter, like Will Grissom or Graham or whatever.
Even The Insider has some of this. Collateral has pieces of this. Miami Vice has pieces of this. I think Public Enemies even have.
I mean, Collateral in a sense is like taking that and distilling it down to the most simplified form of it. Like, Tom Cruise is, of course, he's the antagonist in that film, but it's like you take someone who would have been a protagonist in all of other Mann's other movies. So no, I think that's what really stuck out to me this time in terms of the comparison, was that I just appreciated how much more quiet this film is, and how much more, Heat is obviously a very character-driven film, but it's like Heat would be this with just more action added around it and kind of packed onto it and made into more of a blockbuster. This is kind of more of a character drama, and strictly that. There's a few action there's some moments of action and things like that, but the thrust of this movie, the memorable moments, the best scenes, so to say, are these just like one-on-one character conversations, where it's just rich with like atmosphere and tone. And another thing I think I noticed too this time is how simple this movie is. Like, it's super simple.
You mean from a plot perspective?
Yeah, and that's
sure.
That also contrasts with a lot of like other crime thrillers of the 70s and 80s that had, some of which I love, but had very complicated plots with a ton of moving pieces where you kind of have to pay attention to be like, okay, who's stabbing who in the back here, who's actually working for who. Whereas this is very, very straightforward, and I think again, the reason for that is because Mann is so interested in pulling people in through atmosphere and doesn't want people to be distracted by trying to figure out who's doing what and why. And so it's like super straightforward.
And I think that's one of the things that's a good thing to point out. And I think before we kind of jump in and walk through it, I think that's one of the things that really, I think, and one of the things that I love about doing this podcast is that, at least for me, I'm always working on kind of trying to refine my taste and to find a way to better articulating my taste. And it's not that I'm ever trying to do, I'm not doing that because I'm trying to say that, I think everyone else should think this way. It's because when I get another chance to make a film, I want to be able, I want to refine my vision and what I like, and I want to be able to articulate that as clearly as possible to the people I'm working with. And so that's part of, from a little greedy perspective, that's what I think is really helpful in this process for me. I hope it's interesting to some people out there as well. And also, of course, I enjoy talking to you. But I think that's one of the things that I keep finding in films that seem to really, and I'm talking about films, I'm talking about, 90 to 2.5 hour long films or movies. Generally speaking, simplicity of plot. I think that films that get a little bit, with their head above water, or, a little bit with underwater, with too much plot mechanization, I think I've seen a lot of films hurt by that. And at least for me, I think where the medium really seems to succeed, and again, this is for me, is when the focus isn't really on plot at all. And you actually use that little time, whatever little time you have, to create, and I think Mann does it so beautifully here, to create a few, maybe, a couple set pieces, emotional set pieces, but it's to use that time to really develop atmosphere and to kind of create a tone poem. And I think we've talked about that for some other films, but I think that's where film can do a lot of things. I mean, there's people who've done so many different things and done it successfully with, an hour and a half to 2.5 hours of storytelling, clearly. But for me, for something about that I just really love, where I feel like the format is just perfect for that. There's not a lot of time to introduce a ton of characters and to really get into depth with them. You don't have a lot of time for backstory and exposition. And I don't think film works well whenever you have a lot of that. Yeah. There's not a lot of time to do much. And when I feel most emotionally impacted, it's when I think that time has been spent creating atmosphere and kind of working as a tone poem. And I think that's how I would describe this film.
Well, I think what's interesting about that too is that when I was at university, and I took some cinema studies courses, it can kind of be weird to train yourself to engage with films in sort of a more academic way, because it sounds like now it's work that you have to do. But I think what the real moment, and I think what this podcast has also really helped me do, is that just becomes second nature at some point. And I think that's really especially true for films where it's not necessarily about what's literally happening plot to plot moment. It's what the moment is making you feel through tone, through image and sound, and even just the style of performance. And I think that's one of the things that really, again, kind of has changed over time for me in terms of the way that I appreciate things, and why I appreciate movies like this so much, is that it does sort of stop mattering about how much you're understanding from the literal words on the script, and starts to matter a lot more about how everything in that big kind of soup that is whatever you want to call cinematic, how that actually makes you feel, in a very vague sense, a more abstract sense. And I think what's interesting about here, is that you really start to get for example, I saw the new Mission Impossible 2 nights ago or 3 nights ago, and it is just packed with exposition. It moves at 90 miles a minute, because they clearly are just every scene has to set up the next scene because they've got to get to this, and it's just like
a lot of mechanization.
The amount of moments in that movie that are just like, it'll cut in without even so much of an establishing shot as where we are, and it's just a character saying something to another character to give the audience a piece of information, and then you're on to the next moment. And it's like, that's the sort of thing that really pushes me away from a lot of I mean, I think this is not surprising at all because I bring up Malick all the time as one of my favorite filmmakers, but he in a lot of ways is like really masterful at this, and I think Michael Mann is too. Michael Mann very, very clearly and obviously cares about atmosphere and tone so much, and so I think that it's really fascinating to see that from so early on right here, that you just get these like
and I just want to and I just let's dive into the first scene, for example, that we have here. And I think not only do you have an extraordinary manipulation of everything that's going on to create atmosphere and tone, but you've also got some really great character development and storytelling, setting up the world, setting up the characters, with not a single line of dialogue or hardly any dialogue whatsoever. It's all via action, and it's just right off the bat, and the beginning of this film, I swear, what it really reminded me of, and I think we've done this film too, is Drive. But what you've got here, you're seeing them in action, right? You're seeing Frank, you're seeing James Caan's character Frank and his associates, Barry, who's played by James Belushi. And I'm so sorry, I forget his third man, the guy that's like out in the car on the radio, on the scanner, making sure that the coast is clear. But you see them, they're working, and you've got, Barry's out there, and he's like getting tapped into like the phone lines or the the alarm system lines. And of course we're in 81, so everything is analog, and he's got like 1 million meters, and of course, and it was like this. I think if Michael Mann's not one of the first people to do this, I think he sure popularized it, but it's like, it's always raining, the streets are always wet, everything is shiny. And it's like
even those old sodium vapor street lamps that are like that green hue adds so much to
it adds so much. And so he's like, he's dumping tons of water down the alleyways, like through the fire escape stairs. Everything is just beautiful, but it's and the efficient. We see right off the bat, we don't have to hear anybody say anything. We don't have to have a conversation about it. We don't have to have the cops like at the station talking about, boy, Frank and Barry and the guys, they're like really efficient burglars. They're so good at what they do. Oh yeah, last week when they broke into that safe. Wow, it was just wow. They're pros. They're so great. Right. It's just like we don't know anything from anybody, but it's like within a matter of minutes, we're in the world. We're in the alleyway with them. We're in the Cadillac or whatever, and the cars are great, by the way, in this. Got like old Buick Rivieras and Cadillac Eldorados, these like late 70s or early 80s cars, but like long hoods and beautiful boats, just beautiful boats that work, and not just for character, but they work because they're beautiful in the way Michael Mann shot them. It reminded me a lot about the fake Ferraris in Miami Vice. Anyway, I digress. But and they're pulling off the heist, and it's we've got James Caan, Frank is like working on that magnetic drill that he's got, they've broken in, and he's like, not clamps it, but like it's magnetized to the safe. And apparently, it's like all of the, none of the props were just props. Everything was real. James Caan worked with real thieves to figure out how to do this. I think I was actually, if I'm not mistaken, there's an interview with Caan where he talks about how he actually literally, Michael Mann filmed him breaking into that safe. Like he was taught how to do it, and then he had the tools, and then Michael Mann literally filmed him breaking into the safe, right? And you feel that. I think that stuff pays off. It doesn't feel fake. It doesn't feel like BS, and it feels like we instantly know these guys are pros. This is not like BS, smash and grab. We learn about what's important to these guys, and we learn what kind of men they are right off the bat and how they work together. And that kind of efficiency is just, it makes this film so effective. And I think, and that, and I think it, I think that tends to make a film feel more simple. You talked about how simple this is, but I think part of that, yes, it's true. The plot is relatively straightforward. There's not double cross. I mean, well, there's double crosses, but it's there. It's not like an Agatha Christie mystery story where
Yeah, or even like something like The Godfather, where you're like kind of
yeah,
having to
it's
keep
not.
up with
It's
like
not.
who's doing what.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not an epic with like 5,000 character. It's not. It's not anything like that. But I think the efficiency of storytelling makes it feel even more simple than it actually is.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and I think that that's actually a great thing. I think because you're not stuck thinking about, well, wait a minute, what was this character, that thing? Oh wait, crap. Oh yeah, wait, what? Oh, can you rewind it? I didn't catch that. You know, it frees you up to just get totally carried away, to just
Mhm.
get completely carried away in the emotion and the atmosphere of the film. Um, but yeah, and we've got and he's going, so he breaks into the safe, boom, and I love this shot. And I almost wonder if like Fincher saw this when he was a kid, and it inspired him, because that beautiful, I don't know, it's like an endoscopic shot, something he's must have had. I don't know how they
Like some
did
sort of
this
probe
exactly.
lens, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and so clearly like they're shooting it like into the hole that he just drilled in, so we can see the actual like tumbler mechanism in the safe. That's beautiful. That's something I don't think I had seen in a film prior to this quite like that.
And which is also something interestingly that like that's not really a trademark of Mann's either. Like that's not something that he in particular uses very frequently.
You don't see this. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
why I said it's almost like Mann kind of did this here,
Mhm.
but then and it's almost like Fincher like saw this maybe and like ran with that, because I
Yeah.
feel like that's something that became almost like a trademark or hallmark of Fincher's
Yes.
work, is like,
This kind of,
whether
like,
it's like Fight Club where
forensic.
you're like
Yeah.
going, this like forensic, like I'm going through the van and you can see the bomb and the detonators and the da da da, or if you're in Panic Room and I'm flying through a coffee maker or whatever the hell
Yeah.
he does all this kind of stuff. But and then we see, and then he's into the safe and he's like, whoa, he's throwing away all the jewelry. There's like all this, fine jewelry. He's tossing it out, and we just see he's like picking up like these little
He knows
envelopes.
what he
What's it?
wants. Yeah.
He knows right what he wants, and it's like it's the stuff that most people would be like, oh, that's not what I want. I want all the shiny fancy stuff. No, he throws all that out. Boom. And of course, we found out later, next scene, when he's sitting down at the diner and he's talking to his fence, which, by the way, and you had mentioned this, the casting in this, take a little break here for a second. I mean, whether it's like his fence that he's sitting down to talk to at the diner, Tuesday Weld, who's Jesse, who's his love interest, who works as a waitress at the diner, especially Robert Prosky, who plays Leo, who we meet later, who's like the big bad. It's fun to see James Belushi in a film like this. Like I don't, because of course he went on to play mostly comedic roles later on.
Yeah.
It's like such an interesting cast. I think one of the cops that like starts to bust his balls, and and he like they pull him over in the middle of the road and he's got the shotgun trained on him. I actually think that guy, if I'm not mistaken, was a real thief, was like, taught James Caan how to break into safes, and he's playing the crooked cop in the story. But every one of these
probably
characters,
that he's dealt with many times.
Yeah, for sure. But Ed, you had mentioned that, but I thought I totally agree with you. I think the casting is superb, and I think, and again, not a James Caan fan, not to say that I don't like him, but this has got to be one of his best performances.
Yeah,
it has got
definitely.
to be.
Yeah, and I think what's the other thing to note about that too is that it you kind of see this tradition carry on these days in people like the Safdie brothers, in Sean Baker, where casting for them is so much more than about like publicity. It's like they will. It's as though they wrote this character onto a page and then like summoned them, and it's this incredible ability. And I think that's not that we ever really talk about like casting directors, and at least we did interview Billy DeMotta though, so
Yeah, we
there you
did.
go.
We did, yeah.
But it just kind of goes to show you how important that particular role is on a film, where it's like, these are all so perfect. Even like someone like Willie Nelson in this, who you would just like, Willie Nelson
as
had an
Oprah.
acting career, so it's not like it's completely out of the blue that he would be in a movie like this. But
Right.
the fact that he works so well in this is again, like, it doesn't feel like it was some celebrity hire. It feels like he really does fit that role perfectly.
And I don't know, Cullen, I'd be curious what your thoughts are on this, just to dive into this for a little digression a little more for just a second. I mean, I don't know if this is one of those things where it's just, I look back into the past and I'm just blowing smoke up my own butt, or maybe if there's really something to this. I don't know. But I feel like, I watch a film like this, and all these guys, all these people, by and large, seem kind of sort of like they could be people in anybody's life, right? Now, not to say that, James Caan does have a certain kind of star quality, but it is nothing like I think what would kind of become the norm for a male lead,
like a
somebody
kind of ubermensch, like perfection,
like in today, right? Like today that you might have. Tuesday Weld, she's certainly a beautiful woman, and she's obviously cast here to, where that attractiveness is kind of, meant to immediately kind of, signal that she's a love interest for Frank. But she seems like a real person, though. It's not.
And a really key point about her, I think, is that she's like older in this film too.
She'd had a career.
Like you wouldn't, like, I think a lot of time today, you would have like a young, almost uncomfortably young.
Yeah, definitely.
Like just for that kind of like, and so like the fact that and that's not only today too. I mean, you had that all the time.
That happened
with, like, James Bond and stuff,
throughout the 80s. Long time. Yeah.
So, but it's just like but she doesn't. She's like, like you said, she's so perfectly cast.
She seems real, and like it. But I get, and so this, I want to get to my point here. And James Belushi is a normal looking dude. Willie Nelson, all these guys. I mean, you look at Robert Prosky as Leo. I mean, he doesn't even look remotely like an imposing, scary, like, crime boss dude. He doesn't hit any of the stereotypical physical traits, in my opinion, that you would normally find this character having in a film. But he is all the more effective for that. And I just think the film, whether it's the cops that are chasing Frank down, I mean, it just there's a level of kind of personality, of realness, of it's just, they don't look like, none of these people look like they've come out of central casting, right? None of these people look like the people you would often find cast in a film today, where, and I think you had touched on this a little bit, where where you talked about popularity, but I think even more so. I mean, I remember I haven't been in a room in a long time, but even back then when I was regularly auditioning for things, it was already beginning to be a thing of, how many followers do you have? How many followers on Instagram?
That's something that's come out a lot recently with like even someone like Sofia Coppola not able to cast her film the way she wants because of how many followers her leads have, right? And I think we touched on this when we did Sorcerer, because I think I sort of said that like Roy Scheider is like one of my favorite actors, just because he's such an everyman. Like, he looks like, even somebody who was like a heartthrob like Harrison Ford still kind of just looks like a decently attractive guy. Like, he's not got like a super sharp jawline and like perfect.
I don't think it was until it wasn't until like the second Indiana Jones where he got like crazy buff
when his shirt came off.
Then he kind of did go into, for a little bit, went into like super superhero comic book almost kind of level. But then he went right back from that, and he's doing movies like Witness and Frantic, and
Fugitive,
where he's kind of like the bumbling, like he's a doctor, but he's like totally out of his element, and he's like his wife's kidnapped and stuff like this.
And again, even the first Indiana Jones is kind of like that too, where he's getting beat up.
Yeah.
But the point being, that I think that like you're making a really good point, is that the like it's not some complicated secret as to why this movie is cast well. It's just that they feel like people that you would run into in Chicago, or even
right.
here,
And I think a lot of these people either were from Chicago, or Michael Mann worked I think with them. If you read some of the script, and you're right, the I read kind of an early draft of the script, and it did change a lot, but you get the rhythm of this language. And Michael Mann, of course, is from Chicago. He grew up in the inner city in Chicago, and of course that's a big part of so many of his films. But the language, that rhythm, that cadence is there. He talks with that cadence, and I think and even though like James Caan, I think he's from is he from the Bronx, or at least New York for sure? I don't know. I don't know if it's Brooklyn or Bronx. So forgive me, please, for everybody out there who knows. But there's this works so well. I mean, that cadence is throughout. All of these. It almost even struck me as kind of like a less poetic and kind of grittier, more realistic Mammoth almost. Like there was like such a distinct. Like staccato rhythm and cadence that it almost, for a second I was like, ooh, this is like kind of verging on like the theatrical, this is kind of, but I think it stayed within like the realm of grounded, but it was close almost in some cases. But all
well,
that
also,
worked.
I also want to sort of talk a little bit about, because we've been kind of talking about like what, like, these little key aspects of Michael Mann that he has stuck with through his career. And I just want to also mention about the like you were talking a bit about the look of the film, and like how it's all wet and beautifully lit, but not
and almost all shot at night. I mean, it's like 3/4.
I think one of the funny things about this movie is that, and I think we talk a lot about film and how we like celluloid film. We think it's a very beautiful thing. And Michael Mann is one of the famous directors for switching very early on to digital, before digital cameras looked good, even like they were kind of.
He was a pioneer for sure.
Along with like George Lucas and James Cameron,
which we've and so interesting. I want to throw something out there real quick, because I want to see if this like can add something to your discussion you're going to have in just a second. We did an episode on the Clone War thing.
Attack of the Clones.
Attack of the Clones. And we talked about, a big part of our discussion there was how that film was a landmark film in the move from celluloid to digital in feature filmmaking. And it would be interesting to hear your thoughts. I could go where you're going to go, but I want to throw this out there, where not this film, of course, but later Michael Mann films, where he was also pioneering digital, but in such a different application and manner, and to such a different outcome. But it's interesting to kind of compare that. Anyway, I'm so sorry, but that I just want to
it's that's exactly kind of what I do want to bring up here too, is that it's really interesting to me that Michael Mann shoots this movie like he would later down the road his digital films and Heat. I mean, you can tell in
Collateral.
Heat that it's the same thing. But the film stock here, that I don't know the exact rating of it, but it was probably about 100 ASA, so not very sensitive to light, because that was almost one of the higher standards of, nowadays that's like really fine grain. You would use that for if you wanted, but then it was probably the highest, 50 or 100. But so you were using really low sensitivity film. And you can tell that he wishes, like, I brought this up a little bit earlier, but when he's opening up that rooftop, when they're cutting into that rooftop on the top when they're beginning the heist, you can tell that he just wishes that it was just like them washed in that like dull cityscape light with the but you have this massive, you can tell there's like a massive HMI like pool light just shining right down at them.
Otherwise we couldn't see anything.
Exactly.
Well,
and you sorry, you're gonna
I just want to add I just want to add, so it was shot on Eastman 100 and T 5247, so you're right.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
So it's just, you can tell, and then even in Heat, which was shot on 35 millimeter, which they would have had more, higher ASA films then, or stocks then,
Yeah.
maybe 200 to 400. I don't know if 400 was quite common then, but and you can see that he's still shooting all this stuff, and he's just pushing the film to the very limit of where it'll be. And so I totally understand why he jumped to digital at the earliest possible opportunity, because you watch Collateral and Miami Vice, and those are noisy. Like, he's not shooting digital to be perfectly crisp and clean, and like in a sort of way that James Cameron likes digital, where it gives you like the cleanest, crispest, sharpest image. Michael Mann is just like, I want to shoot things with really low natural light. He describes, I think, in the commentary.
Skyline. He wants the night skyline to look like it would if you were there yourself, looking at it with your own two eyes. He describes that in the commentary for Collateral. He says that, like, one of the things about LA is that at night, when the fog rolls in, like, there's like a low cloud that will often roll in from the ocean. And that the city lights kind of bounce off that and create this like natural sort of soft hue. You live there. I've been to LA a bunch of times, so I know that is very much true. Yep.
It's very true for a lot of cities on coasts, but that's such a dim light that you would never be able to capture that with film. Like, even modern film stocks that are higher, it'd still be very difficult to get that, just the subtlety of that light. And so you see something like Collateral or Miami Vice, where he's like blasting it to, like, probably like 2000 ISO on these digital cameras, and it gets super
old Phantoms,
noisy.
They were
Thompson Vipers.
Thompson Vipers. Yeah.
And so it's again, I've kind of gone beyond this too. I think I've, in the past few years, kind of evolved from loving film, which I still do, and I think film is beautiful, but also starting to appreciate how different camera technologies can achieve different things for different people. And I think that a big part of that for me was also the fact that, again, I shot my first feature on a Blackmagic cinema camera with really nice cinema lenses with matte boxes, and lit it and things like that. And I shot my second one primarily on like an Osmo Action, a tiny little GoPro thing. And I think I just, again, talking about how we kind of have evolved through this podcast and over these years, like the conversation that you sort of started at the beginning, I think that that's one thing that I've sort of really started to appreciate about Michael Mann as well, is that, like, people kind of gave him a lot of shit for the way that he shot Miami Vice and Collateral, and even further on, like, what's the one with Johnny Depp?
Public Enemies.
Public Enemies, yeah. And that one is shot on like broadcast television cameras.
I do have to say, he crossed a little bit of a line for me with that one.
It looks really bizarre.
Not that I want to get too far off on this, but and I want to bring it back to the film here, because there's a lot of other scenes I want to talk to you about. But just to say, I do have to admit, Public Enemies is the only film I have ever walked out of the theater on.
It is and the motion blur on that movie is very bizarre.
And part of it, now I have to admit, like, without getting hyperbolic, part of it was that this was like before, assigned seating, or at least there were no theaters around me where it was like assigned seating, and I was kind of late, and so I had to sit much further forward than I would normally like to.
Yeah.
And I'm all about immersion. But there does become a point where you're like in the second row or so, or, and it's just that combined with the handheld, like you said, this, like, the motion, like, it was just, there were a couple aspects about that film that I was literally nauseous. It actually made me nauseous. And as much as at that time that I loved Michael Mann, I loved Johnny Depp back then, I was so ready for this film, I had to leave the theater. To leave the theater. It's the only time I've ever had to do it. So, but let's bring it back. You had mentioned the, scaling down the film, small budget. I think Mann had about $5 million to shoot this with. Now, that's back in 1980, so it sounds like a lot of money to me. You know, that's
and
probably
back then that was a significant amount. Yeah.
I mean, so it's not like he had nothing, but you know,
Mhm.
as far as as far as like closing down, sections of Chicago and shooting huge gunfights or something, probably that's going to be outside the limit. But you talked about how he kind of shifted his strategy to having, emotional set pieces. And I want to talk to you about, so after we see the first heist and we kind of set up who these guys are, who Frank is, what a professional he is. And, we get a first taste when he's there. We kind of are introduced to his love interest in the diner. I mean, there's only a few sets here. There's like the bar he owns, there's the car dealership he owns, there's the house he ends up having. There's the diner. I mean, there's not a lot of places, but we're in the diner, and he's got the meet with his fence, and we find out he's like, look, I don't want my money on the street. I don't want it. I don't want it anywhere but in my pocket. I do the job. You get the product. I get the cash. I'm keeping it clean. That's it.
Mhm.
So we also kind of get a piece of his kind of motto and kind of life strategy. But we really get the breakdown, and I really love this scene, and I had to like go back and I watched it actually a few times where and I hope I don't have this out of order, but I'm just excited to jump to this, where he's talking to Tuesday or to Jesse in the diner, and he's kind of explaining his whole kind of life strategy, and we get everything we need to know about Frank from here, if we did what we didn't know already. And it's interesting to me because there's like this vulnerability in a sense. There's like he's got this little collage, what we would call today a vision board, right? Like people make these like, oh, I want to have this kind of house and this car, and I want to have 3 kids and a spouse, whatever it is, and they put a little collage, or they do clippings from a magazine or news, whatever. We don't have newspapers anymore, really, but we don't even really have magazines anymore, really. So I don't know. I guess you're doing
How do
this
serial
with,
killers write their letters now?
I guess you're like doing this with like, I don't know, how people nowadays would do this. You're like
junk mail.
doing screen captures from Instagram. I don't know what the hell. Anyway, forget all that though. Here he's got like this little handmade collage, and it's like, you think about it, right? Like I found this pretty amazing. I found this super touching. You've got this like hardened, and he's telling the life story, right? He's like, I went to jail when I was young, and he talks about this mindset that he had to have, where it was like, look, you have to come from a place of like, your life's worth nothing. You're already gone, because if you're coming from any other place, they're going to smell that fear, and you're going to walk out into the yard and you're going to get gone. Like you're going to get had. Like you have to let all of this like regular square life stuff about, I care about my life and I'm protecting it. I'm planning for the future and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. All that's gone. And it's all about survival. And it's almost like you have to see yourself as already dead, in order to survive, because people have to get this sense of like, you've got nothing to lose. Like you're already, in order to make it. And so he's like, lays all this out, right? And it's like hard stuff. But then he pulls out this little collage of all the things that he wants. And it's like his father figure, Okla. It's a family, it's a wife, it's kids. It's like this house. And I mean, you think about this in real life, like who would pull out a little collage of like, this is my dream. Like these are my, and I just felt like it's almost this naivete that he had about relationships, because of course he spent his entire like adolescence and young adulthood in prison. He's not going to know anything about relationships, right?
And
like
grew up in an orphanage, right?
Like mature adult relationships, complex stuff. And families, and like how, and he's like, I this is what I want though. It's like he sees this in the world, and it's like what he didn't have as a child, and it's like, I want this. I want to be
But he also,
father.
interestingly too, he also kind of doesn't know how to properly get it in a weird
no
way.
That's what I mean. That's what I'm getting at.
It's like almost transactional.
His naivete. It's just like he's like, I don't have time. I spent too much time in jail. I don't have time. He doesn't say it this way, but it's like, I don't have time. Let's cut the games. Let's cut the crap. You and I, let's do this. Let's make this happen. Yeah. And it isn't transactional in the sense that like, I'm going to pay you and you're going to be my wife. It isn't like that. It doesn't come off as transactional in that way because there's a sweetness to this. I think there is like an actual sweetness and a bit of a romance here. But yes, he doesn't know how to do it. It's super awkward, and she's laughing and like, what is going on? Like, what's up with you, man? Like,
Yeah.
this is not how this is done. But she's so intrigued, and it's set up right that he's come into the joint. He's come into this place for maybe, I don't for a long time. I forget what he says, but it's months and months and months, or maybe even years. He comes in every day. He says hi to her. They talk, and so it's not like this is coming out of nowhere. They have kind of built up this, cute little relationship of, him being there and saying hi, and but always being respectful and never hitting on her. But yeah, I guess but it's it's superb acting by both players. Tuesday and James are exceptional. James is especially just so good in the scene.
Yeah.
But we've got this like long dialogue scene between them in the diner. And you're right. I guess sorry, I've been going on and on, but this is one of those great set pieces. And of course, it's kind of almost reminiscent of the Al Pacino, De Niro set pieces, in the diner in Heat. But it's really simply shot. It's not, there's nothing about it that's crazy over the top. It's just great performances and great writing.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of I think one of my favorite things about this, and I think kind of arguably something I like about this movie over Heat. I think that this movie does all of that really personal. I think because this movie is so hyper personal and so small scale, you get kind of a really, really intimate look at those. Not that Heat is also not intimate. Heat is very intimate in its characterization, but in this, it's just I think that again that simplicity, that smaller scale, where this really does feel like a tiny blip of life in Chicago. Now, we're on an unfortunately tight schedule today, but right before we finish, I just thought we would discuss real quick, just even mention how great the soundtrack is here with the Tangerine Dream.
I almost feel like maybe we could do like a part 2. Maybe this could be like the first time we ever do a part 2. There's so many other things I'd just love to chat about in regards to some of the other performances and some of these other great scenes. But you're right, and the soundtrack. And so I know you do have to leave. So, well, how about this? Let's do our first ever 2-parter.
Sure.
How about that?
I like that idea. That sounds good.
We're almost at our 100th episode, and we've never done a 2-parter. I mean, come on.
We can start stirring the pot.
Yeah. So, all right then. Well, how about that, everyone? We're going to break this up into 2 parts because we want to give the rest of this film its fair due, and so that's exactly what we're gonna do.
Perfect.
So, well, thanks for everybody for hanging in there with us. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We're going to come back with part 2 of Michael Mann's Thief in our next episode. Until then, everybody, we'll catch you on the flip side.
Yep. Bye-bye.